It seemed like an ordinary day, but fate had something unimaginable in store. It was late afternoon, and little Emma was playing in her daycare, carefree and full of joy, like any child her age. As usual, her father, Jason, arrived to pick her up. There was a certain seriousness on his face, but that wasn't unusual. He was always quiet, reserved, and not much of a talker. Emma ran toward him with excitement, and Jason scooped her up in his arms before heading toward the door. But today, something felt different. Mrs. Johnson, one of the daycare caregivers who had always been attentive to the children, felt a strange uneasiness in her chest. It wasn't that Jason was a stranger. He had picked up Emma many times before. Yet, there was something about his demeanor today that unsettled her. Maybe it was the way he spoke, maybe it was the slight hesitation in Emma's face, or maybe it was just a gut feeling, an instinct that whispered to her that something wasn't right. Unable to shake the feeling, Mrs. Johnson decided to follow them. She kept a careful distance, watching as Jason carried Emma to his car. But as she took another step forward, her eyes widened in shock at what she saw. Meanwhile, across the city, at a crowded bus stop, a young college student named Jamal stood waiting for his bus. Earphones in, lost in his music, he was exhausted after a long day but relieved that soon he'd be home. Finally, the bus arrived, and he stepped inside, grabbing a seat near the aisle. That's when he noticed her, a pregnant woman standing near the front, struggling to keep her balance as the bus swayed with each turn. The other passengers were either too lost in their own world or simply unwilling to give up their seats. Jamal hesitated for just a second before standing up and motioning for her to take his place. She looked at him, surprised, almost as if she hadn't expected anyone to notice her struggle. Then, with a small nod, she sat down, letting out a quiet sigh of relief. The rest of the ride was silent. Jamal returned to his music, and the woman seemed deep in thought. But just as his stop neared, she reached into her bag, pulled out a small piece of paper, and quickly handed it to him. "This is for you," she said softly before stepping off the bus. Jamal looked down at the note, curiosity creeping in. Slowly, he unfolded it. But the moment his eyes scanned the words written on it, his heart skipped a beat. What happens next will leave you speechless. Stay tuned to find out the shocking truth in the next part. Mrs. Johnson's heart pounded as she took slow, careful steps forward. Her instincts screamed that something was off. Jason was holding Emma a little too tightly, his movements a little too rushed. He didn't stop to buckle her in right away like he usually did. Instead, he glanced around, as if checking if someone was watching. Then, he quickly opened the back door and placed Emma inside. Emma wasn't crying, but there was something strange in her posture. She wasn't as talkative as usual, not excitedly telling Jason about her day, about the games she played or the drawings she made. Instead, she sat stiffly, her small hands clenching the straps of her backpack. Mrs. Johnson felt a chill run down her spine. Maybe she was overthinking. Maybe she was just tired. But what if she wasn't? What if something was wrong, and she just walked away, only to regret it later? Before she could decide what to do, Jason got into the driver's seat, shut the door, and the car started rolling forward. Acting on pure instinct, Mrs. Johnson pulled out her phone and snapped a quick picture of the car's license plate. Then, without wasting another second, she hurried to her own car, fumbling with her keys as she tried to follow them at a safe distance. Jason's car moved steadily down the road, but then something strange happened. He didn't take the usual route home. Mrs. Johnson knew the roads well. Parents took the same turns every day, following a routine. But Jason took an unexpected left, heading towards a part of town that didn't seem like the right direction. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her mind racing. Should she call someone? The police? Emma's mother? Was she making a mistake? Meanwhile, inside the car, Emma finally found the courage to speak. "Daddy, where are we going?" Her voice was small, hesitant. Jason's hands tightened around the wheel. He didn't answer right away. Then, after a beat, he forced a smile. "Just a little detour, sweetheart. Don't worry." Emma stared at him, her big eyes filled with uncertainty. Something about her father didn't feel right today. He wasn't acting the way he normally did. She knew his smiles, his laughs, his sighs. But this was different. She turned her head and looked out the window, watching as familiar streets faded behind them. She had a sinking feeling in her stomach. Back in the other part of town, Jamal was still standing in the bus, holding the small piece of paper the pregnant woman had given him. He glanced around, as if expecting someone to explain what had just happened. But no one was paying attention to him. His fingers unfolded the note, his eyes scanning the words scribbled across the paper. And then, his breath hitched. "I know who you are. And I know what you did." Jamal's hands went cold. He read the words again, his mind scrambling to make sense of them. What did she mean? Who was she? He quickly looked outside the bus window, searching for the woman. She was already walking away, disappearing into the crowd. Should he run after her? Should he ask her what she meant? A part of him wanted to crumple the paper, pretend it was nothing, pretend it didn't shake him to his core. But another part of him knew this wasn't random. It couldn't be. The bus came to a stop, and Jamal stepped off, stuffing the note into his pocket. His heart pounded as he walked down the street, his mind replaying the moment over and over again. Who was she? And how did she know anything about him? At the same time, miles away, Mrs. Johnson kept her eyes locked on Jason's car. She wasn't sure how far she should go, how long she should follow. But then, Jason made another strange turn, pulling into a parking lot of an old, empty building. Mrs. Johnson's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't right. This wasn't home. She parked at a distance, gripping her phone. Every instinct in her body told her she needed to do something. But before she could decide, Jason stepped out of the car and walked around to the back seat. And then Emma's voice rang out, loud and clear. "Daddy, I don't want to be here." Mrs. Johnson's heart raced as she reached for her phone. Whatever was happening, she had to act fast. Because something about this wasn't right. And deep down, she knew Emma wasn't safe. Jason's grip on Emma's wrist tightened for a split second before he forced himself to loosen it. He crouched down to her level, trying to keep his voice calm. "Sweetheart, it's okay. I just need to take care of something real quick. Then we'll go home." Emma's big eyes searched his face, looking for reassurance, but something inside her told her not to trust it. Her father had never taken her anywhere unexpected before. He never made quick stops on the way home. And the way he was acting, she had never seen him like this. Mrs. Johnson watched from a distance, gripping her phone tightly, her thumb hovering over the screen. She could call the police. She should call the police. But what if she was wrong? What if Jason was just running an errand? What if this was all just a misunderstanding? And yet, every instinct in her screamed that something wasn't right. Jason stood up and looked around the empty parking lot. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. Mrs. Johnson couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could see the tension in his body. He was talking to someone. Whoever it was, it didn't seem like a normal conversation. Emma shuffled nervously, her small hands gripping the straps of her backpack. "Can we go home now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason hesitated, his phone still pressed to his ear. He turned slightly away from Emma, his free hand running through his hair. He was nervous. Mrs. Johnson's heart pounded. She couldn't just sit here and do nothing. But before she could make a move, Jason suddenly grabbed Emma's hand again, this time firmer. He started walking toward the building. Emma resisted. "No, Daddy, I don't wanna go." Jason sighed, kneeling beside her. His voice was softer now, almost pleading. "Emma, trust me. Just come with me, okay? I promise, everything's fine." But Emma wasn't convinced. Her little feet stayed planted firmly on the ground. Mrs. Johnson's pulse raced. She had seen enough. She pressed the dial button and lifted the phone to her ear. Meanwhile, across town, Jamal sat on a park bench, staring at the small note in his hand. The words kept echoing in his mind. "I know who you are. And I know what you did." The message felt like a punch to the gut. What was it supposed to mean? What had he done? He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't hiding anything, was he? He went through his past in his mind, searching for something, anything, that could explain this. But nothing made sense. Then a thought hit him. What if this was some kind of mistake? What if she had given the note to the wrong person? But deep down, something about that didn't feel right. Jamal took a deep breath and pulled out his phone. He hesitated before searching for unknown numbers in his call history. Maybe the woman had tried to contact him before. But there was nothing out of the ordinary. He glanced around the park, suddenly feeling like he was being watched. He shook the thought away. He was overreacting. Right. Still, something about this whole situation didn't sit right with him. And he had a feeling, whatever this was, it was just beginning. Back in the abandoned parking lot, Jason sighed deeply. He looked around again, as if checking if someone was watching. Then, he knelt beside Emma once more. "You trust Daddy, don't you?" he asked, his voice unusually gentle. Emma hesitated. She loved her daddy. But something about this moment didn't feel like the daddy she knew. Mrs. Johnson gritted her teeth as she listened to the ringing on the other end of the call. "Pick up. Come on, pick up." Then suddenly, Jason's head snapped up. His eyes locked onto something or someone. Mrs. Johnson froze. He had seen her. Their eyes met across the parking lot. A moment of stillness hung in the air. Then, Jason stood up, his entire posture shifting. Mrs. Johnson's blood ran cold. She had to think fast. Because now, he knew she was watching. Mrs. Johnson's breath caught in her throat as Jason turned toward her, his eyes locking onto hers with a sharp intensity. He wasn't just looking, he was analyzing, deciding what to do next. For a brief second, neither of them moved. The air between them felt charged, like a wire pulled so tight it was ready to snap. Then, Jason took a slow step forward, keeping one hand tightly wrapped around Emma's wrist. Emma looked between him and Mrs. Johnson, confusion clouding her little face. Mrs. Johnson's instincts screamed at her to act. She gripped her phone, pressing it harder to her ear. "Pick up. Someone, just pick up." Jason took another step. His mouth opened slightly, as if he was about to say something, but then he stopped. His head jerked to the side, listening. Mrs. Johnson heard it too. The distant wail of sirens. Her heart pounded with relief and fear all at once. Someone had answered. Help was coming. Jason's entire demeanor shifted. His grip on Emma's hand tightened. His jaw clenched. He looked around, his eyes scanning the parking lot as if calculating his next move. Then, in an instant, he acted. He scooped Emma up in his arms, turned on his heel, and ran. Mrs. Johnson's body moved before her mind could catch up. "Hey!" she shouted, sprinting after him. Her legs burned, her breath came fast, but Jason was fast, too. He dodged between parked cars, heading toward the back of the building. "Emma!" Mrs. Johnson cried, desperation cracking her voice. Emma twisted in Jason's arms, her little voice shaky. "Daddy, no. Where are we going?" But Jason didn't answer. He just ran. Mrs. Johnson's heart pounded. She couldn't let him disappear. She pushed herself forward, reaching the corner of the building just as Jason turned down a narrow alley. And then, he stopped. At first, she didn't understand why. Then, she saw them. 2 police officers, standing at the other end of the alley, blocking his escape. Jason froze, his breathing ragged. His grip on Emma tightened for just a second before he slowly, very slowly, set her down. Emma took a step back, her eyes darting between her father and the officers. She looked scared. Confused. One of the officers stepped forward, hands raised in a calming gesture. "Sir, put your hands where we can see them." Jason didn't move. His chest rose and fell heavily. Mrs. Johnson held her breath, feeling the weight of the moment press down on her. Meanwhile, across town, Jamal paced back and forth in his small apartment, staring at the note still clenched in his hand. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. He had gone over every possible explanation, maybe it was a prank, maybe it was some weird coincidence, but none of it made sense. And the worst part? He couldn't stop thinking about that woman's face. The way she had looked at him when she handed him the note, there was something knowing in her eyes. Something heavy. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He had to find out who she was. With a deep breath, he grabbed his phone and started typing. Back in the alley, the tension thickened. The sirens were getting closer now, red and blue lights flashing against the darkening sky. Jason's eyes flickered between the police, Mrs. Johnson, and Emma. He was trapped. There was nowhere left to run. But still, he didn't raise his hands. Mrs. Johnson swallowed hard. Please, she thought. Just do the right thing. The officers took another cautious step forward. And then, Jason moved. Mrs. Johnson gasped. The officers reacted. And in the next heartbeat, everything exploded into chaos. Jason's body tensed, and in one swift motion, he reached into his pocket. The officers shouted, their hands flying to their holsters. Mrs. Johnson's breath caught in her throat. Stop. Hands up. Now, one of the officers commanded. For a split second, the world slowed. Emma flinched, her small body trembling as she stared up at her father, confusion and fear swirling in her wide eyes. Mrs. Johnson took a shaky step forward, her voice breaking. Jason, don't. Jason's hand shot out, but instead of a weapon, he pulled out his phone. He held it up as if trying to show something, his other hand raised slightly in surrender. The officers hesitated, their fingers still tense on their holsters. I can explain, Jason stammered, his breath coming fast. His eyes darted to Emma, then back to Mrs. Johnson. This isn't what you think. Mrs. Johnson swallowed hard. Then tell us what's going on. Why did you run? Jason's mouth opened, but no words came out. His eyes flickered with something, panic, regret, maybe even guilt. The officers exchanged wary glances, still keeping their distance. And then, Emma did something no one expected. She stepped forward, her little hand reaching for her father's sleeve. Daddy, she whispered. Are you in trouble? Jason's face crumpled, as if those words had hit him harder than anything else. He turned to Emma, kneeling down so they were eye level. No, baby, he said softly. Daddy's just. He hesitated, exhaling shakily. Daddy's trying to fix something. Mrs. Johnson's stomach twisted. There was something deeper happening here, something she still didn't understand. But before she could process it, the sirens grew louder. More police cars pulled up at the end of the alley, red and blue lights flashing like a warning. One of the officers gestured toward Jason. Sir, we need you to come with us. Jason looked at Emma, his eyes filled with something raw and desperate. I need you to be brave, okay, he whispered. Emma's lower lip trembled. She nodded, but tears welled up in her eyes. Mrs. Johnson felt her throat tighten. She had followed her gut, she had done what she thought was right, but now, watching Emma cling to her father's sleeve, doubt crept into her mind. Was Jason really dangerous? Or was there more to this story? Meanwhile, across town, Jamal sat frozen in front of his laptop. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, his breath coming fast. He had searched the name. Her name. The woman from the bus. And what he found made his blood run cold. Her face stared back at him from an old news article. But the headline, that was what sent a chill down his spine. Missing woman presumed dead. Jamal's heart pounded in his chest. The article was from years ago. It detailed how she had vanished without a trace, how the case had gone cold. But he had just seen her. She had been real. She had spoken to him. She had given him that note. His hands clenched into fists. Something was very, very wrong. And he was about to find out what. Jason exhaled slowly, his hands still raised, his eyes locked onto Emma's. The flashing red and blue lights reflected in her teary gaze, making her seem even smaller, even more fragile. Mrs. Johnson's heart twisted as she watched the officers step forward, ready to take Jason into custody. But something about the way he held himself, something in his eyes, made her hesitate. Please, Jason said suddenly, his voice low and urgent. I need to show you something. The officers exchanged glances, their hands still hovering over their holsters. One of them took a cautious step closer. Sir, you're in no position to negotiate. Jason nodded, swallowing hard. I know. But you need to look at my phone. His voice cracked. It's about my daughter. Mrs. Johnson frowned, stepping forward. What do you mean? Jason carefully tilted his phone's screen toward them. The officer nearest to him leaned in slightly, his eyes scanning the screen. Then, his expression changed, his brows furrowed, his lips tightening. He gestured for his partner to come closer. Mrs. Johnson's pulse quickened. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The officer hesitated before flipping the phone around for her to see. Mrs. Johnson's breath caught in her throat. On the screen was a string of messages, desperate, frantic messages. "Unknown number. We have her. If you want to see her again, you know what to do. Unknown number. No cops. No mistakes." And then, the most chilling one of all. "Unknown number. She's already waiting." Mrs. Johnson's blood ran cold. She turned to Jason, realization hitting her like a wave. "You weren't running from us. You were running to someone." Jason nodded, his jaw clenched. "They took my wife. And they said if I didn't do exactly what they wanted, I'd never see her again." His voice broke. "I wasn't trying to hurt Emma. I was trying to save her mother." The officers hesitated. The entire situation had shifted in a matter of seconds. What had started as a routine call had turned into something much bigger, something far more dangerous. "Who are they?" one of the officers asked. Jason shook his head. "I don't know. But they wanted me to take Emma somewhere. A meeting spot." His hands trembled. "I couldn't do it. I couldn't let them take her, too." Mrs. Johnson felt a wave of nausea wash over her. The pit in her stomach, the gut feeling that had made her follow Jason, had been right. But she had been wrong about the why. Before anyone could respond, Jason's phone buzzed again. Another message. "Unknown number. Time's up." Jason's face drained of color. His hands tightened around the phone. "We have to go. Now." One of the officers cursed under his breath before speaking into his radio. "We need backup. Possible hostage situation." Jason turned to Mrs. Johnson, desperation in his eyes. "Please, you have to believe me. They're going to kill her." Mrs. Johnson inhaled sharply. There was no more doubt in her mind. Jason wasn't the villain here. He was a father caught in something much bigger than anyone had realized. And they were already running out of time. Across town, Jamal's heart pounded as he scrolled through the old article, his mind racing. The woman who had given him the note, she had been missing for nearly a decade. Declared dead. And yet, she had stood right in front of him, looking him in the eye, handing him a message that made no sense. Unless. His fingers shook as he reached for his phone. He had to find her. He had to know. But just as he started dialing, his apartment lights flickered. A chill ran down his spine. And then, a knock at the door. Soft. Steady. Jamal froze. His breath caught in his throat. He turned toward the door, his heartbeat hammering in his ears. Then, a voice. Low. Familiar. "You shouldn't have looked me up."